The life paths of our today's heroes developed in radically different directions. One of them tried to achieve success by using others and deceiving at every step, while the other worked diligently, sparing no effort and time. Their fates crossed only after many years, and this meeting turned out to be fateful. The city of Austin, the administrative center of the state of Texas in the United States of America, has a population of about 1 million. A significant proportion of the population is young people studying in local higher education institutions. After getting an education, most remain in the city, working in the field of high technology, because Austin is considered the new Silicon Valley. It was here in 1982 that Stephen Burt moved with his wife, having won a tender to create an independent television company. At that time, he could not even imagine what dizzying heights he would reach in the future and how tragic the finale of his life would be. Steve was born in 1924 in Dallas, Texas. He had a warm relationship with his mother, but never saw his father. After graduating from school, the young man tried his hand in the field of marketing and advertising, and later received a diploma as a manual therapist. During World War II, Stephen served in the Navy, mastered the profession of a pilot, and received an engineering education. Despite this, in the post-war period, he had to face significant difficulties in finding a job. Eventually, he got a job as a shoe salesman in Dallas with a modest salary of $15 a week. Despite the low income, Burt would later call this job his greatest luck in life. After all, it was there that he met his future wife, model Alice Adams. They were an amazingly harmonious and bright couple. Alice, a slender and petite girl, was fond of such masculine entertainments as fishing or horseback riding. Both had an inexhaustible supply of inner energy, so they perfectly complemented each other. Shortly after that, Steve managed to get a coveted job at a radio station in Dallas. He went a long way from an ordinary janitor to a leading advertising agent. Over time, Burt became a producer of a television program and a very popular specialist in his field. While Stephen made his career, Alice took care of the household. She gave birth to 3 children, a daughter in 1948 and sons in 1950 and 1953. During this period of life, the successful businessman turned into a real symbol of success. He was engaged in real estate and advertising, sold cars. In this way, Stephen managed to earn his first million quite quickly. But a real triumph awaited him at the age of 50, when he won a tender to create his own television company. The Burt couple decided to settle in Austin. They immediately bought a luxurious mansion with a charming view of the city landscape. Their choice fell on one of the most expensive areas of the city, which allowed them to enjoy a high level of privacy, which at times could even seem excessive. Steve and Alice were pleased with family life and prosperity in their spacious house with an area of about 5,000 square meters. Here they joined a prestigious country club, membership in which even in those days cost $50,000. However, at that time, the Burt couple no longer had any financial difficulties, so for them it was a small amount. It was during this period of life that the main character of our story began to rapidly gain excess weight. He jokingly explained this by his lifestyle and income level. Stephen loved to eat and drink well, while leading a sedentary lifestyle. On the other hand, his wife continued to carefully take care of her figure and health. Starting from 1986, the profits from Steve's media business began to grow even more. It seemed that success was following him on his heels. Unfortunately, soon the family was struck by a terrible misfortune. In 1993, doctors diagnosed Alice with a malignant brain tumor, which was a real shock for all relatives. Stephen supported his beloved wife in every possible way, never leaving her alone during exhausting courses of chemotherapy and radiation therapy. In the summer of the same year, Alice's illness receded. The Burt couple went on a cruise to celebrate their 45th wedding anniversary. But unfortunately, already in September, the insidious illness returned, and on October 13, 1993, Alice passed away. Stephen was going through a difficult separation from his beloved wife, because he belonged to those people for whom family was a vital necessity. For a long time he could not recover from the loss. Every day the man came to the country club of Austin, where he drank several glasses of strong alcohol alone, had dinner, and then returned to his orphaned mansion. Despite the fact that there were maids and nannies working in the house who helped take care of the house and children, it was very difficult and lonely for Stephen. Close people believed that he needed a new life partner or another assistant who would help put his life in order. Soon fate brought Steve together with Celeste Martinez, an attractive 30-year-old woman who worked as a waitress at the country club. He offered her the position of housekeeper, and she willingly agreed to help the millionaire. Celeste was born on February 13, 1963 in Los Angeles. Her biological mother immediately abandoned the child. The baby was almost immediately adopted by the couple Edwin and Nancy Johnson. They could not have their own children for a long time due to constant miscarriages. Now the couple realized that the only chance to feel the joy of parenthood was to take a child from a shelter. Fortunately, in those days in the USA, there were no problems with this. In 4 years, the Johnsons adopted 4 babies, the second of which was Celeste. At the time of adoption, she was only 2 days old. Unfortunately, even after Celeste found a new family, her trials did not end. Later, she said that in childhood, her adoptive mother suffered from depression and nervous breakdowns. The girl's most horrific memory was associated with an incident when a woman immersed the heads of her children underwater in the bathtub. Celeste, who was standing nearby, was in complete misunderstanding of what was happening. The mother assured that in this way she was just rinsing the hair of the kids after washing. But for Celeste, it looked much scarier. Sometime later, the girl's adoptive mother was placed in a psychiatric hospital due to another nervous breakdown, which was associated with the use of diet pills and exhaustion. Celeste's relationship with her adoptive mother was generally quite tense. The girl was always more attached to her father, but later she repeatedly accused Edwin of abuse, which allegedly took place when she was 11 years old. The man insisted that this was a complete lie. When Celeste was in high school, her adoptive parents divorced. The girl became even more tough in communicating with loved ones. Nancy and Edwin were waging a fierce battle for custody of their adopted children. The man was accused of domestic violence and sexual harassment, while the woman was considered dangerous because of her past mental problems. During the trial, Celeste testified against her father. She even said that once he hit her in the face with a knife, but insisted that the scar disappeared without a trace over time. This whole story sounded extremely implausible. During that period, Celeste behaved inappropriately and showed excessive aggression. The girl was even taken to see a psychiatrist, but the specialist could not understand what was happening to her. In the end, everyone came to the conclusion that the teenager was just going through a difficult transition period, and her strange behavior was explained by hormonal changes. Throughout this time, Celeste lived in new foster families. Despite the behavior problems, the girl was always popular with guys due to her attractive appearance. She was involved in sports and looked great. Everyone knew Celeste as a carefree and insolent teenager. As soon as she got her driver's license, she immediately began to race through the streets of her neighborhood at a frantic speed, endangering herself and others. Problems with the law continued to haunt Celeste even after these events. When she turned 15, she met Craig Breaker at a bar, who was 2 years older than her. Shortly after they started dating, the girl began skipping school and smoking. Most of the time she spent with Craig on the beach. Later, the young people began to live together. At the age of 17, the rebel became pregnant with twins. It was then that her propensity for lying manifested itself particularly clearly. Celeste would say that these children were long awaited, then complain that her boyfriend was against the pregnancy. She told the doctors that once Craig hit her in the stomach, but later recanted those words. Despite all these circumstances, on December 6, 1980, Celeste and Craig got engaged. It was strongly recommended that the expectant mother adhere to bed rest due to the high risks of losing the children, but she continued to lead her usual lifestyle full of entertainment and parties. The young people got married, and on February 6, 1981, twins Jennifer and Christina were born. The girls were born 2 months prematurely and spent 3 months in the hospital connected to life support devices. After returning home, the relationship in the young family became frankly violent. The couple continued to lead a dissolute life, constantly quarreled, which often turned into fights. Later, Craig admitted that he had problems with alcohol, but insisted that it was Celeste who initiated conflicts because of her short temper. According to him, she inflated quarrels out of the blue. The girl repeatedly inflicted bodily injuries on herself in order to then accuse her husband of domestic violence. Celeste always justified her behavior by the fact that she was sexually abused as a child. However, over time, her story underwent a transformation. Now she claimed that not only she, but also her older brother, suffered from harassment by their father. However, many people doubted the veracity of Celeste's words, who had a reputation as a pathological liar. Once the girl turned to the police with a complaint of domestic violence by Craig, and she did it after her husband caught her in bed with a neighbor. Enraged Craig, threatening with a gun, attacked the lovers. For this incident, he had to spend 4 months behind bars, although in fact no one was hurt. Celeste, on the other hand, obtained a court order that made it impossible for him to approach her. In May 1982, the couple officially divorced. At that time, their twins had barely turned a year old. Despite all the accusations and the received restraining order, after the divorce, Celeste repeatedly left the children with their biological father in order to attend another party. Due to housing problems, the woman moved with the kids to her friend's house. But soon her friend got tired of enduring an intrusive neighbor who constantly shifted the care of the children to her. So in the end, the heroine of our story was asked to get out. During this period, Celeste's behavior became even stranger. She constantly made up various stories and even turned to the police for absolutely ridiculous reasons. Once a woman reported the theft of a wallet, which was later found at her home. It seemed that Celeste was little interested in her own children, because the lion's share of her free time this young mother devoted to entertainment with friends. She repeatedly left the kids with acquaintances and could disappear for several days in a row. Eventually, the woman gave her daughters to a foster family altogether. Relatives and friends often justified such behavior of Celeste by her young age and unpreparedness for motherhood. She did not receive any support from her relatives and, in fact, was herself an abandoned child who did not have a normal relationship with her mother. So all this eventually resulted in a voluntary renunciation of her own children. But sometime after these events, Celeste got back together with Craig. The very fact of the reunion of the family was enough to regain custody of the children. The young people began to live together again, and for a certain period their life resembled the life of a normal family. But the mother's behavior did not improve at all. In 1985, she accused the father of her children of This time, Craig was not going to take responsibility for another of his ex-wife's inventions because he was facing a very real and long prison term. The case went as far as a lie detector test. The polygraph confirmed the veracity of the young man's words, so the police released him. From that moment on, the trust of all relatives and friends in Celeste was finally lost. No one believed a single word of hers anymore. Later, absolutely all the stories of this woman were questioned. Even her complaints of sexual abuse by her father and brother found no confirmation. It seemed that Celeste was simply manipulating people by making up all these terrible things. Over the next few years, the heroine of this story managed to be married twice. She either restored her rights to custody of the children or lost them again. Celeste's behavior did not improve at all. The woman remained just as aggressive and deceitful. During this period, doctors diagnosed her with depressive disorder. The woman underwent treatment and took prescribed medications, but all this did little to help. From time to time, she had nervous breakdowns. After breaking up with another boyfriend, fate brought Celeste together with a wealthy man named Jimmy Martinez, who had his own business in Austin. At that time, the woman's daughters were already 11 years old. She continued to struggle with Craig for custody of them. From the father's point of view, Celeste was a terrible mother, and the children were in constant danger with her. Craig managed to win the trial, but Celeste kidnapped one of her daughters, Christina, with whom she had a warmer relationship. When they tried to return the girl to her father, the biological mother put up a frantic resistance, thus separating the twin sisters. Once in Austin, The heroine of this story plunged headlong into her usual dissolute life. But these fun times did not last long, because soon Celeste was summoned to Arizona in connection with accusations of fraud. As it turned out, she tried to rob a couple who had once adopted her children for a short period. The scammer resorted to her usual tricks, making unfounded accusations, but this time such methods did not work. The investigation established that Celeste burned her own car in the middle of the desert in order to receive an insurance payment. Her victims found out about this fact, which helped to expose the criminal. The scam was uncovered. Fortunately for Celeste, the judge in this case turned out to be a rather sympathetic man, so she managed to get away with only a suspended sentence and a fine of $20,000. In exchange for this, the woman promised to move to Texas and never return to Arizona. It was here that she began to live with Jimmy Martinez, whom she soon married, taking his last name. However, the man quickly noticed that his new wife was issuing credit cards in his name and spending tens of thousands of dollars on who knows what. Since Celeste was Jimmy's legal wife, he could not prove to creditors that these were not his debts. When the man tried to demand the return of these funds from his wife, she resorted to her proven method. She accused him of sexual violence. Moreover, the woman even inflicted wounds on herself, cutting her wrists with scissors. It seemed that once again she was trying to stage a attempt in order to frame her husband. In the end, this marriage also broke up. The next stage in Celeste's life was getting a job at the Austin Country Club in the fall of 1994. It was here that the woman met Stephen Burt, a wealthy man for whom she began to work as a housekeeper. This job strangely went to Celeste because she knew absolutely nothing about housekeeping. The woman could neither cook nor clean nor even wash or iron clothes. But she firmly decided to win the favor of the rich man by any means. So, without the employer's knowledge, Celeste shifted all her duties to other maids. Thanks to her attractive appearance and feigned charm, it did not take Celeste long to become a kind of comfort for Stephen after the death of his beloved wife. The woman managed to enter the circle of the millionaire's acquaintances. She even joked with his friends, openly admitting that she got a job as a housekeeper, although in fact she could not do anything at all. Everyone politely laughed at these jokes, although they perfectly understood that Celeste was by no means a match for Steve, and she herself did not even try to hide her complete lack of interest in this man. In conversations with her daughter Christina, Celeste openly stated that she liked Stephen for only one quality: his wealth. At the same time, Celeste did not stop making up various stories about herself, so the woman claimed that she had a diploma as an accounting specialist, but this job allegedly bored her terribly. Even then, many people from Steve's entourage suspected that Celeste was a pathological liar. Even Craig Breaker, her first husband, tried to warn the gullible millionaire about the true nature of this person. Once Craig called his ex-wife to once again discuss the problems associated with the children. Stephen answered the phone, and Craig took the opportunity to warn him about how dangerous Celeste could be. However, all these warnings did not make any impression on Steve. For him, the relationship with Celeste became a ray of light in a difficult period of life, and the man simply enjoyed his new happiness. It must be admitted that at first the presence of this woman in his life also had positive consequences. When the doctor told Stephen about an enlarged heart and a high risk of a heart attack, it was Celeste who put the man on a diet and insisted that he walk more. She accompanied him everywhere, making sure that he followed her instructions. Thanks to these efforts, Stephen managed to lose more than 20 kilograms. His life was filled with new colors. It became easier for the man to move. Shortness of breath disappeared. It seemed that he had finally recovered from the loss of his beloved wife and began to spend more time with his children. Soon, Stephen and Celeste got engaged. This caused a great deal of concern among all the millionaire's friends and acquaintances. Even his longtime friend, who worked as a judge, strongly advised him to conclude a prenuptial agreement, suspecting that Celeste was simply after Steve's money. Eventually, the future spouses managed to agree on the terms of this contract. At that time, the groom's fortune was estimated at $12 million. In the event of a divorce, Stephen retained the right to own all the real estate. If Celeste lived with him in marriage for at least 3 years, she would receive the right to a payment of $500,000. In the event that the woman stayed with him until his death, she would inherit $1 million. In addition, the generous groom gave his chosen one $500,000 as a wedding gift. So on February 18, 1995, 32-year-old Celeste became the wife of 70-year-old Stephen Burt, for whom this was already the 4th marriage. The wedding ceremony took place in the same Austin country club where just a few months earlier Celeste had worked as a waitress. Of course, not everyone perceived this wedding positively. Of all of Stephen's children, only his daughter Becky was present at the celebration, who sincerely rejoiced for her father and hoped for the best. Celeste was also supported by one of her twin daughters, Christina. The rest of the children ignored this event, considering this marriage insincere and purely calculating. But even Becky, despite her good intentions, felt that Celeste Martinez was an incredible liar and manipulator. The newlyweds spent their honeymoon in New Orleans, and already in March 1995 they returned home. Celeste's daughter Christina also settled with them. The girl repeatedly noticed how her mother secretly crushed some pills and sprinkled them into her husband's food. To all questions, Celeste invariably answered that it was just a sleeping pill. She said that she wanted this fat man to sleep peacefully at home, while she herself would go out to have fun. Many people knew that Celeste spent nights in clubs while her husband slept carefree. However, no one dared to tell Steve about this so as not to upset him. However, soon he himself began to notice alarming signs. Despite the fact that the millionaire did not limit his wife's expenses in any way, a month after the married life it turned out that she had exceeded all possible limits on the accounts. Celeste managed to squander more than $100,000. But what outraged Steve the most was the disappearance of valuables from his personal safe. One of his friends who worked at a bank told him that it was his new wife who secretly took out and pawned the jewelry of his deceased wife, Alice. This news made Steve furious. Eventually, he decided to kick his young wife out of the house. However, Celeste began to make excuses in despair. She assured that she had an outstanding debt of $20,000 in Arizona, and it was for its repayment that she took the jewelry. The woman promised to return everything to the last cent as soon as she settled her financial problems. Thus, Stephen found himself in the same trap as all of Celeste's previous husbands. She was lying again, trying to buy time and squeeze out as much money as possible. Steve had to buy back the precious jewelry of his deceased wife, which he cherished so much, from the pawn shop on his own. The man paid off Celeste's debts resulting from insurance fraud and withdrew his divorce petition. Moreover, at his insistence, the young wife underwent an examination at a psychiatric clinic. There she was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder and prescribed a course of medications that she pledged to take. But of course she lied again. Now Celeste realized that she was dealing not with a naive fool, as it seemed to her at first, but with a smart and experienced person. So she had to act much more carefully and thoughtfully than this scammer was used to. First of all, she decided to force her husband to buy new real estate already during their marriage. In this case, upon divorce, Celeste could claim half of its value. The woman began to complain that she could not feel free in the house that Stephen had bought back in the life of his first wife, Alice. Eventually, the man agreed and sold this mansion. The couple bought a new house near Lake Westlake Hills. According to the plan, it was to be rebuilt according to the design of a famous architect. To implement this idea, Steve hired a whole team, an architect, designers. He himself was also present at the site almost every day, personally monitoring the progress of work. Meanwhile, Celeste continued to put pressure on her husband, demanding more and more property and money. At the beginning of 1996, Stephen met with his lawyer and made changes to their prenuptial agreement. Now, in the event of his death, Celeste was to receive not only $1 million, but also half the value of their new luxurious mansion. While Stephen personally monitored every stage of the construction of their new home, his young wife was mostly engaged in shopping. She appeared at the construction site extremely rarely. At the same time, Celeste embarked on the implementation of the second part of her insidious plan. Given that after her husband's death she was to receive a considerable fortune, the woman decided to maximize this process. So the couple started a daily ritual of drinking alcoholic beverages together. Stephen was fond of expensive elite alcoholic drinks, but his wife secretly replaced them with much cheaper alcohol of dubious quality. In addition, she added some medications to these drinks. Among her tribesmen, Celeste openly mocked this situation, calling her signature cocktail a grave one. Now she had only to wait for the cherished plan to finally work. Meanwhile, her first husband, Craig, committed. After this tragedy, Celeste's youngest daughter moved to live with her mother and stepfather. Stephen officially adopted both girls. Around 3 o'clock in the morning on October 2, 1999, Texas millionaire Stephen Burt called the 911 rescue service. The voice of the 75-year-old man clearly betrayed his panic and confusion. He screamed into the receiver, begging the dispatcher to save his life. From Steve's confused explanations, the 911 employee realized that the man had received a very serious injury. The poor man assured that he was literally holding his own entrails with his hands so that they would not fall out. At the same time, the victim could not explain what exactly happened to him. He woke up from unbearable pain and desperately begged for help. Stephen told the dispatcher that his wife Celeste was in another part of their huge mansion. The man asked to call the woman and call her to him. However, the rescue service's attempt to contact Celeste yielded no results. She did not answer calls. When law enforcement officers arrived at the scene, no one opened the door for them. The police had to go around the house on the other side. They found themselves in a small inner courtyard, a patio. Behind the glass doors leading to this patio, a man was sitting on the sofa. With one hand, he convulsively clutched the phone, and with the other, he held his stomach. The doors were locked, and precious minutes were ticking away with every second. So one of the officers, without thinking twice, broke the glass and made his way into the bedroom. Steve was indeed in an extremely difficult condition, but he was still alive. His stomach looked terrible, as if torn to shreds. Stephen denied that he had recently undergone any surgery, and now the stitches had come apart. However, he could not explain what exactly happened to him. The millionaire was in critical condition. It was hard to believe that he was still alive. The man had turned deathly pale and had lost a lot of blood. The police urgently called a rescue helicopter, which was supposed to take the victim to the hospital. Moving through the mansion to open the front door for the medics, law enforcement officers noticed Celeste's young wife and her daughters in one of the rooms. Christina said that she woke up from the flashing of the blue lights of police cars outside the window. The mother literally pushed her out into the street by force, demanding to find out what was happening in the house. The girl called the rescue service, but she was told that Stephen had already contacted the dispatcher himself and called for help. Celeste and her daughters unanimously assured that the man had not undergone any operations recently, so his injuries could not in any way be the result of surgical stitches coming apart. One of the policemen tried to calm the frightened women. He explained that an emergency had occurred and Stephen had been seriously injured. Upon hearing this, Celeste went into hysterics. She frantically begged to save her husband's life. The daughters barely managed to calm their mother down. Later, the girls went to the bedroom where Stephen was lying. They were not allowed near the wounded man, but at least they were able to make sure that their stepfather was still breathing. Meanwhile, Celeste went outside and sat on the porch, nervously taking a drag on a cigarette. When the paramedics arrived at the scene, the behavior of the victim's wife seemed surprisingly calm. The woman seemed to be crying, but no one saw real tears on her face. And in the next room at that time, her husband was desperately fighting for his life. His wounds were so severe that the ambulance medics began to simply stick plasters and bandages on the ragged wounds on the go, trying to at least somehow stop the terrible bleeding. Suddenly, one of the policemen noticed a spent cartridge case from a shotgun shell on the floor in the bedroom. After that, the room where the attack on the owner of the estate took place was declared a crime scene. Law enforcement officers immediately called the investigative operational group and forensic experts. All unauthorized persons were taken out of the bedroom. An official investigation into this event has begun. it turned out that the man was shot by none other than his own wife. True, Celeste herself denied any involvement in the attempt on Stephen. According to the woman, at the moment when her husband got a bullet in the stomach, she was quietly sleeping in another wing of their huge mansion. Law enforcement officials were able to confirm this alibi with the help of testimony from Celeste's daughters. Soon, new spicy details of this story began to surface. It turned out that during treatment at a psychiatric clinic, where Celeste ended up due to prolonged depression, she met another patient named Tracy Tarlton. Only Stephen's inner circle knew about the existence of this woman. Christina recalled that her mother once casually mentioned her. When information about this connection leaked to the press, all sorts of rumors spread around the city. Some suggested that feelings flared up between the women. Others were convinced that Tracy could feel a certain sympathy for Celeste, but not the other way around. Investigators hypothesized that the millionaire's young wife could have paid her new friend to kill Stephen. Thus, Celeste was going to speed up the famous day when she would be able to receive her husband's inheritance and take possession of his wealth. Tracy inevitably found herself in the district police station. During the interrogation, the woman was quickly broken. She admitted that on October 2, 1999, she broke into the Beard couple's estate, crept into their bedroom and shot the owner of the estate twice in the stomach. After that, Tracy instantly disappeared from the crime scene. However, she categorically denied Celeste's involvement in this attack. During searches at the suspect's home, the police managed to find a gun. Ballistic examination confirmed that it was from this weapon that an attempt was made on the life of a Texas millionaire. But despite severe injuries, Stephen somehow managed to survive. The doctors literally pulled him out of the next world. The man was even able to return home, where he continued to recover under the close supervision of his young wife. Unfortunately, this joy was short-lived. On January 22, 2000, Stephen died of thromboembolism. Doctors were convinced that the thrombus came off as a result of the same ill-fated shotgun shot. After the death of Stephen Beard, the charges against Tracy Tarlton were changed to a much more severe one. She was now charged with premeditated murder. Therefore, the woman faced a much more serious term of imprisonment. And while the investigation was ongoing, the main character of this story, Celeste, continued to enjoy her usual lifestyle. She spent her late husband's money at her own discretion. What's more, about 6 months after Stephen's death, his insatiable widow entered into a new marriage. Such behavior of Celeste raised more and more questions and suspicions. However, the woman stubbornly denied any involvement in the death of Stephen Beard. And although at first Tracy Tarlton tried in every possible way to downplay the role of Celeste in this terrible story, now, having learned about her new marriage, the accomplice felt betrayed. She began to insist that Celeste should also be held responsible for the death of the Texas millionaire. According to Tracy, Celeste shamelessly deceived her, promising a happy future together. Allegedly, it was she who persuaded her friend to remove from the road the only obstacle to their happiness, Stephen. That is why Tracy dared to commit this terrible crime. However, it later turned out that Celeste had deceived her. Eventually, Tracy Tarlton agreed to make a deal with the investigation and plead guilty. In addition, the woman agreed to testify against Celeste in exchange for a commuted sentence and a reduction in the term of imprisonment. And finally, in 2002, the trial began in this high-profile case. Tracy, as promised, acted with testimony against her former friend and accomplice. The prosecutor's office, for its part, provided strong evidence of Celeste's guilt, an audio recording in which the woman clearly offers Tracy money for the murder of Stephen. This recording was also obtained only thanks to cooperation with Tarlton. Even Celeste's own daughters testified as witnesses at the court hearing. Most amazingly, both girls testified against their own mother. They said that Celeste was looking for a hired killer to get rid of her husband, and later she intended to remove Tracy in the same way in order to forever silence her friend and not give her the opportunity to testify against her in court. After listening to all the arguments, the jury found Celeste Beard guilty of first-degree premeditated murder. The court sentenced the woman to life imprisonment with the right to parole no earlier than after 40 years of imprisonment. Tracy Tarlton, the direct perpetrator of this terrible crime, was also found guilty. She was sentenced to 10 years in prison, followed by a 12-year probationary period. After serving the term determined by the court behind bars, Tarlton was released in 2011. Later, in an interview with journalists, the woman admitted that there was not a day when she did not regret the committed atrocity. She said that the grave sin of murder would forever lie on her conscience. In 2004, while giving an interview to reporters, Celeste Beard still continued to insist on her complete innocence. The woman is still behind bars. She will receive the right to apply for parole only in 2042, when she turns 79. But whether she will use this right and whether her request will be granted is currently unknown. Too much will depend on the behavior of this insidious woman, her sincere repentance and other circumstances. At least now she continues to serve her life sentence, and in the coming decades, she is unlikely to be released. What, in fact, is a fair retribution for the terrible act that this person dared to commit? And if Tracy Tarlton still has a chance to atone for her guilt before God and people, then for Celeste such an opportunity, it seems, will no longer be. I look forward to hearing your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button if the story resonated with you. Until next time, friends.